Sally. Thanks, Craig. Great. Gosh, really hard to follow on from that, actually. I'm kind of quite emotional now, so bear with me. So today I'm following on the series of Lost and Found in the book of Luke. We've been following Luke, that amazing man who really wanted to get the truth across, didn't he? That was what Dave started the series off by saying. And I'm going to actually share a few lost and found stories, because I think basically, I love a good lost and found story. It's great to hear them, isn't it? But I'm also going to look at it in relation to the cross. We're going to fast forward to Good Friday a little bit and think about the cross. And we're going to look at the crowds. We're going to look at the choices of the two men crucified either side of Jesus. I have to admit, I was really quite daunted when I found out I was doing a talk on the cross. You know, it's really important, isn't it? It's really foundational. It's pivotal. It's absolutely the bedrock of our faith. It's really important to get it right. And then my son, my very helpful older son, said to me, "Yes, Mum, that's right. It is the most important thing, and this will be the most important talk of the year." So no pressure from my son there. Thankfully, he's not here today, so that's all right. So I wonder if you've ever been lost. I wonder if you've ever been physically lost, maybe somewhere you don't know, maybe somewhere you do know, or whether you've ever felt lost internally, you know, with all that the world throws at us. I wonder whether that word feeling destabilized is a slightly better word than lost, that kind of internal feeling of being lost. Well, Jesus said these words. He said, "I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life." They don't sound like a statement of being lost, do they? They sound like you know what your purpose is, you know who you are, you know the truth, you know you've got life, not a lost statement. But let's think about that word truth. Jesus says, "I am the truth." Let's think about truth just for a minute. We understand that truth is based on facts, don't we? And science, right? The problem is we can interpret truth and facts to make all sorts of different things, all sorts of conclusions, all sorts of predictions, and then it changes. Information changes, science changes, and we get a better understanding. For example, the planet Pluto, I always thought was a planet, but in 2006 they downgraded it to a dwarf planet. That's crazy, isn't it? And what about this fact? So here's another slide of the BFG with very big ears. So obviously they're fake ears, not real ears. That's the BFG. So I was once told that your ears and your nose carry on growing for the whole of your life. Well, you will be relieved to know that that is misinformation. It's fake news. That does not happen. It's just sheer gravity makes it look that way. Phew. The thing is, we want truth to hold on to and to orientate our lives around, don't we? We make big choices and decisions about how to live, and it's not always clear, and sometimes we can feel a bit manipulated. There's so much misinformation out there, fake news, conspiracy theories. It's just a muddle, isn't it? You can look at all the different truths that the governments are saying, you know, the two governments about the war in Ukraine. We were just hearing about it, and you can see the power of misinformation being spread about. And sometimes it can make us feel quite lost. We're constantly trying to work it out, aren't we? Even the pandemic was a very destabilizing. You know, it really threw everything up in the air for us, didn't it? I think life is often a state of feeling quite disorientated. But I think that Jesus orientates us to something real. All too often, I don't know what's around the corner. I still have to make decisions. I still have to think about what to do. But Jesus says those words, "I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life." I think they're really important truths and things to hold on to. So think about this crowd on Palm Sunday. Today we're doing Palm Sunday. They didn't seem lost at all, did they? They had a strong sense of what should be happening, why they were there, who they were welcoming, what they thought should happen. But in a sense, they were looking at it all wrong, weren't they? There's an irony here that Jesus did come to rescue them, but not from the Roman Empire, but from all the wrongs, all the injustices, all the brokenness of this world and life, and in a way nobody could really understand. So today we're going to look in Luke a little bit further on in the story. We're going to look at the cross. So let's read from the passage in Luke 23. So Simon from Cyrene has just carried Jesus' cross to the place of crucifixion. And here we go, it's the point of crucifixion. 2 others, both criminals, were led out to be executed with him. When they came to a place called the Skull, they nailed him to the cross, and the criminals were also crucified, one on his right and one on his left. And Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they are doing." And the soldiers gambled for his clothes by throwing dice. The crowds watched, and the leaders scoffed. "He saved others," they said. "Let him save himself if he really is God's Messiah, the chosen one." And the soldiers mocked him too by offering him a drink of sour wine. They called out to him, "If you are the King of the Jews, save yourself." A sign was fastened above him with these words, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals hanging beside him scoffed, "So you're the Messiah, are you? Prove it by saving yourself and us too while you're at it." But the other criminal protested, "Don't you fear God even when you have been sentenced to die? We deserve our crimes, but this man hasn't done anything wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus replied, "I assure you today, you will be with me in paradise." So this crowd at the end of the week have completely changed their opinion of Jesus. They seem like a different bunch of people, don't they? They had turned against him. The religious authorities have done a really good job, haven't they, in the week of turning the people into believing that Jesus wasn't who he said he was. He was a lie. He was weak. He was a fraud. He was ineffective. And mostly he was a big old threat. The truth is that Jesus spoke out against their practices and their heavy-handed requirements of people to follow God. That was an evil in Jesus' eyes. They thought they were the most important, but Jesus did that astounding thing of elevating the poor, the sick, the outcast, the unclean. It really properly annoyed them. And they wanted him gone. And the sheer power of misinformation during that week, we know how it plays out, the lies they spread about Jesus is astounding. But then again, we see that, don't we? We see how lies can twist things. But what about disillusionment and disappointment of the crowd? They also cause people to lose hope and trust and turn their hearts. You cannot imagine the disappointment of a crowd that one week welcoming Jesus like we did this morning, welcoming him, their long-awaited king, the person who would rescue them from the Romans, to turning their back on him and wanting his death. Yes, they were fed lies, but they were lost in their hurt and their frustration. Again, we can see that when we're disappointed, we can see that played out around us. But if we think we could never turn our backs on Jesus, just look at Peter. I think there's a painting coming up of Peter. So this is Peter, I'm turning my back on Jesus, and there's Jesus just sort of looking at him. The moment Jesus was arrested, all his friends ran off. They turned their back on him. They were scared. But Peter didn't quite, did he? He followed him into the courtyard, and he was there. But when he was challenged, when he was put under pressure, he said he didn't know him. In a heartbeat, he turned his back. It's not difficult to wobble, is it? When we suddenly feel insecure, or we're challenged, or we're worried about our reputation. So, I was physically lost when I was about 8 years old. It was the only time I felt properly scared about being lost. So I was 8, and this is where I grew up. So some of you in the crowd here might recognize this place. So I grew up in a city on the other side of the world, and this is Pedder Street in Hong Kong. This is where I grew up. So do you recognize it? Some of people do. They're nodding their heads, yes. So it's very, very crowded city. I knew it as the most crowded place in the world when I grew up. So I got lost on this street. So I used to get my minibus home on this street with my mum. I was 8 years old. We were making our way here. I don't know if it was this road or the road next to it, but there was an alleyway, and I had to dart through. I said to my mum, I'm going to go through the alleyway, this shopping precinct, and Mum was going to walk around the other side, and I said, I'll meet you on the other side. I was 8. I had a little bit of freedom. I was so excited. I dashed through the alleyway, came out, stepped out, crowds everywhere, no mum. I didn't know where she was. I was absolutely terrified. I thought I knew the plan. I thought I knew the lay of the land. I knew this place really well, but it didn't work out right. Perhaps we don't always make good judgments, or things change and we don't fully understand the full truth, even about Jesus' life and death. Perhaps it's all too complicated, or raises too many questions, or we just haven't had it explained to us in a way we fully understand. Well, I had a few bits of truth in that moment. I had some bits of truth that helped me. I knew what my mum looked like. That was good. And I knew her voice. My mum had a really distinct voice. I could always pick her out in a crowd. And they were really important. Of course, I was terrified, but in the end, she turned up. She found me. It was great. Through the crowd, I spotted her. We were reunited. I was found by her. It was brilliant. So Jesus says in John these words, "My sheep listen to my voice. I know them and they follow me. I give them eternal life and they will never perish. No one can snatch them away from me, for my Father has given them to me and he is more powerful than anyone else." So his voice is powerful. But will we listen to him or the crowds, the voices, the world opinions, or even our own doubts and insecurities? So there's another really powerful lost and found story, number 2. You may have remembered this story. It came out from the Ukraine war. Like a couple of weeks in, there was this little lad called Hassan. He was 11 years old. His mum had a terrible dilemma. She wanted him saved, so she put him on a train. She had to stay to look after her own mum. So he was 11 years old. He had a few bags, and she wrote, can you see the phone number? She wrote her relative's phone number on his hand, and they lived in Slovakia. So she put him on a train, and he had to make his way to Slovakia. Amazingly, through the kindness of people helping him along the way, somebody lent him a phone. He was able to contact his family, and he was reunited 1,200 kilometers later. Now, he did not know how that journey, his mum did not know how that would work out. Amazingly, he had that phone number. It's like a bit of truth that he held on to, and he had great, great courage, didn't he? 11-year-old lad. I wonder if we know little bits of the truth of Jesus. Maybe we know a lot, maybe we know a little bit. We don't always have the full picture, but just something to hold on to. I think that's enough to help us find our way to him. So let's look at the 2 robbers and what they saw in Jesus. So one of them scoffs him, doesn't he, with the crowds. In a sense, he follows the crowds, but the other one is really fascinating. We don't know much about him. We don't know his backstory. We don't know how he ended up on the cross. He was a criminal. But he would have known a little bit about Jesus. The whole city was aware of what was happening. He couldn't not know about Jesus. And he knew he was innocent, didn't he? But in that moment, I think he sees a few incredible things. It's like a moment of clarity on the cross. He doesn't even say, like the others. The others go, if. They question Jesus. But he doesn't say, if you are the Son of God. He says, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. I think he had the bravery to look up from his own situation of pain and death and really see Jesus. So I think he sees 2 truths, 2 important truths. Firstly, he hears Jesus forgive the crowd. Jesus says those words, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing. The crowd, the ones hanging him on the cross. This man who is dying, and to everyone else, he's failing. Jesus is failing, is somehow, and he has the authority, the power to forgive. Only God can do that. The very thing that the priests were angry about is the thing that this criminal realizes is the truth. He must be the Son of God. Jesus, who was always giving out life to those around him, is here giving out life again at his death, forgiving them as he dies. His way was always to give of himself, to heal. That's what he did. He restored, he gave joy, he gave of himself so that others gain life. People say this was the greatest act of love, to lay down your life so as to give life. And here he is giving all of him for all of us, all of creation actually, restoring us. The robber didn't see weakness failure and death, but life being given out, almost the biggest power of all. So this is the first bit of truth we can hold on to. Jesus was the Son of God. He was the life-giving restorer of people to God. Like the criminal, we can follow him to this place on the cross, and we may feel like we're giving up everything, but actually we gain fullness of life through him. So secondly, he knew, the criminal saw that Jesus was innocent. He said, didn't he? He said, you know, we deserve our punishment, but Jesus, this man is innocent. But the thing is, if he was God, he could have got himself down, couldn't he? He knew he was God, but somehow he stayed on the cross. He was choosing that path. The criminal knew there was a consequence for his actions, a justice being served out. But for Jesus, that was a total injustice. But he also knew that it was somehow not final, because he said, remember me when you come into your kingdom. There was more to come, a hope, somehow tied up with Jesus, somehow tied up with the death that Jesus was experiencing, going through. So the second truth he gained was that it was life forever with Jesus. There was something beyond death. Jesus entered all of death, all our wrongdoings, all the world's brokenness to free us from it. In that moment of recognizing this truth, that Jesus can forgive, the criminal gained his own forgiveness, his full freedom, and so can we. He likely didn't really know what all of it meant, did he? You know, he was on the cross, he was just seeing what was happening with Jesus, but he did have enough truth to hold on to, a faith in Jesus to recognize a bit of who he was and what he meant. He had the courage to look up from that situation and see that there was promise of life beyond. And therefore, for himself, what hope he suddenly had. I wonder if we need to keep looking at Jesus and the cross and see the hope and grace, the fullness of life and love on offer. These are really big truths for us to hold on to. So on Friday mornings, I'm part of a Alpha Bible study. It's like a follow-on group that we're doing. I'm doing it with Marion and the lovely Hannah Hedinger. We join up with this bunch on Friday mornings, and we are looking at Luke. And truth is really important. Last week, we were imagining we were part of the crowd watching the life of Jesus unfold. And we were thinking, what do we choose to see in him? Now, truth is such a big deal in our discussions. And they're not so sure. They keep saying, is it twisted? Can we believe these stories that Luke wrote about? Can we rely on it? And does it change anything? Are we even willing to see Jesus and follow him, to allow it to affect our lives? Or are we a bit like an old dog that can't kind of learn a new thing or see something new? Oh, but perhaps today you are hearing something of the truth of the cross. Maybe it's new. Maybe it's really familiar. Maybe it's not always fully understood. Maybe there's a mystery in it that we don't always fully grasp. But perhaps there's a bit like the shepherd is calling you now, and something inside you recognizes his voice and choose to follow that bit of truth. A bit like me trusting in my mum's voice when I was lost. Or perhaps it's completely new and you've never fully known, and you trust it will carry you through. A bit like that lad with the phone number, a bit of truth that will carry you through when the journey isn't mapped out. Well, I would say if you are thinking that or feeling that, make sure you come and chat to somebody at the end. Come and chat to Sally or me or Craig. Don't leave without having a chat. If this is really challenging you this morning, if maybe it's new truth or something you're trying to wrestle with. But you might think that actually this man on the cross had nothing to lose. He was about to die. But if you think that, I think you're looking at it wrong. He had everything to gain at that point. And the thing is, he realized it. In that moment, he was truly found by Jesus and given the promise of life beyond his certain death. And actually, I just love that Jesus did that. I just love that in that dying moment, he took time to be with another precious and broken man, to bring him into life. But what about with us? We've got the rest of our lives to live, haven't we? So I just want to finish by reminding us that Jesus said, what did he say? I am the way, the truth, and the life. We, in our living, have the fullness of life on offer. And what is the purpose for that fullness of life? What is the purpose for our living? Well, I really believe the cross means that we have been rescued not just from something, but for something. And Tom Wright, I don't know if you read Tom Wright, he's a great theologian. He would say, we are rescued, we are full, we are free, we are found, so that we can be partners with Jesus in his work of loving, freeing, bringing justice, drawing people into the love of God. Ultimately, the rescue and renewal of the whole world. Well, that's really big, isn't it? But that is our true DNA. Through the cross, we are brought back to what we were fully made for. So next week, it's Easter Sunday, and we're going to look at the power of resurrection and the Holy Spirit power. Even with all of life's difficulties and struggles, that power of the Holy Spirit is what draws us into fullness of life. So we're going to do communion in a minute. Sally's going to bring us to communion. So maybe while we're doing communion, we can look at the cross. We can think about those truths that we hold on to. Maybe it's something you've written on your piece of paper earlier. Maybe it's something that you've heard through what we've been talking about earlier in the service. You can hold on to those truths and look at Jesus on the cross and hear his shepherd voice calling you. Okay.